If a police officer approaches your window and asks whether the vehicle belongs to you, most people respond almost immediately, often in less than 2 seconds. That quick answer can end up giving the officer more leverage than you realize, potentially shaping everything that follows during the stop. Officers are not asking this by accident. That single question is often used early in a stop because it can shift the interaction in a specific direction. Many drivers do not realize how much weight their response carries in that moment. The structure of a traffic stop is usually straightforward. The officer initiates the stop, documents are checked, a warning or citation is issued, then the encounter is supposed to end. However, in some cases, officers may try to extend the interaction beyond the initial violation and move it toward a broader inquiry. That expansion often begins with simple-sounding questions that feel casual. The question about ownership is one of those entry points. It can appear harmless, but it may be used to gather information that leads to further questioning. Once a driver responds in a way that confirms ownership or explains possession informally, it can open the door to additional follow-ups about who the actual owner is, how the vehicle was obtained, and the circumstances of use. This can extend the stop significantly. According to the pattern described in reviewed body camera recordings, drivers who engage in detailed explanations tend to prolong the interaction. Those who respond briefly and avoid unnecessary detail generally limit the conversation to required documents. Some drivers respond with explanations such as mentioning a relative or friend and describing how they borrowed the vehicle. That kind of response can lead to further questioning about names, relationships, timing, and travel plans. What begins as a routine stop can turn into a longer discussion with multiple layers of questioning. Others choose a more restrained approach, offering a short statement and then providing only the required documents, including license, registration, and insurance without additional commentary. This approach reduces the amount of extra information shared during the stop. This perspective is often linked to legal principles discussed in Burgess v. Tompkins, a Supreme Court case from 2010. In general terms, the ruling is referenced for the idea that individuals are not required to answer questions beyond what the law compels, and that providing identification and required documents is typically sufficient in most jurisdictions. The idea behind this approach is to avoid unnecessary statements that could later be interpreted in different ways. Once spoken and recorded, any statement becomes part of the official record of the stop. What many people are not told is that silence itself can function as a form of protection. And once a driver stops volunteering information, the officer is generally left with two paths: continue the stop based only on the original reason or conclude the interaction. The longer a driver keeps talking, the more opportunities there are for the conversation to expand beyond its initial scope. When an officer repeats the question about vehicle ownership, a restrained response is often used to avoid turning the stop into an interrogation. One example response is to refer to the registration location and clearly state that no further questions beyond the scope of the stop will be answered. The tone is calm, respectful, and direct. Without that restraint, many drivers tend to elaborate. They might confirm ownership while also describing financial arrangements, co-signers, or personal details about family members. Once that kind of information is offered, the interaction can shift. The officer may begin asking about relationships, employment, travel history, and other details that extend the length of the stop significantly. The strategy used by many experienced drivers is to provide only what is required, then stop speaking. Documents are handed over and no additional explanation is added. The silence that follows limits further expansion of questioning. This approach is often associated with police interviewing methods that rely on silence as a pressure factor. Officers may wait for the driver to fill the gap in conversation, sometimes revealing additional details without being prompted. When that does not happen, the dynamic of the interaction changes. Legal discussion around this includes reference to Florida versus